The Beit R'Fuah group was the very first group of people I shared our story with, except for my mom and dad, and sisters. But aside from Beit R'Fuah, there was nobody else.
At Congregation Beth Am, throughout the summer months, members of the congregation give the sermons on Friday nights, and we meet in our outdoor chapel. So there we were one summer night under the trees, and Jane Marcus, the president of our sisterhood, Beth Am Women, steps forward to give the sermon. Jane is a powerhouse. She's a bright, forceful, articulate, highly admired member of the congregation. She is a leader. And she says on that night, I'm a person who has lived with depression. I'm a person who has struggled. I have felt alone at times in my life. She opens her life, she opens her heart to the congregation and speaks from the heart. And it's a revelation. People are blown away. How could this leader of the congregation be also a person who has struggled with mental illness? At the end of the sermon, she is surrounded by people who tell her, thank you for your courage, and we want to do more. And that was the genesis of Beit R'Fuah and all our congregation's efforts to bring support to those who live with mental illness.
For the past 2 years, I've been a research assistant with the Stanford Center for Information Technology.
After Jane Marcus told her story to the congregation, and people were very excited that she had brought this topic up, she was going to spearhead in the next 5 months a mental health conference at Beth Am, which would ultimately lead to the birth of Beit R'Fuah and a new template for a way for other congregations to address these issues of mental illness.
The problem of mental illness is a huge problem in our culture, and we're not dealing with it successfully on a global basis. And what I'm hoping is that we can look at it on a community basis and get our communities to deal with the problem of stigma face to face across the dinner table. Realize that the person sitting next to you might have a history of depression in the family, as I do, and that's why my own family experience feeds my desire to learn more and to help people more and to recognize that it's in every family.
Jane suffered very much from her illness, and she wanted to reach out to others and help them so they didn't have to suffer as she did. It was her commitment. It was her focus. It was her passion.
Parshat Balak by Jane Marcus on July 15th, 2005. 16 years ago, I suffered a major depression. It wasn't an overnight thing, but the lowest point of a gradual, at times imperceptible but inexorable 3-year spiral into darkness, into madness. At the time, I didn't know what was happening to me. I was, I thought, a well-adjusted person, an upper-middle-class, successful Jewish professional, happily married, the mother of an 8-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. I didn't seek treatment for a long time, and when I did, it was around the edges of real medical help. As the shadow of untreated depression settled over me, I became increasingly overwhelmed by sadness, hopelessness, and the inability to cope with my life. The insidious part of this illness, caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, is that it's your mind and behavior that are affected. Eventually, with the help of a compassionate, skilled, and dedicated physician, I was able to find my way back. And I came back much better, attaining a new perspective and an inner peace that I had never known existed. Since my recovery, I've taken on as a personal commitment the mitzvah of helping others climb their way out of the dark gray pit in which this disease drops you. It's a blessing to see those with whom I've shared my experience once again at peace, productive, and enjoying life. I hope that by telling my story, I can be an opinion leader, a change agent, someone whose message can be heard and responded to. I'm extremely thankful that Beth Am Women has chosen to focus its attention this year on the topic of mental illness.
Jane didn't tell her story that night to get kudos or attention. It was a very hard thing for her to do. She gave this sermon so that she could show people that recovery is possible with the right help and support. Soon after giving her talk, she helped organize a Beth Am conference on how the Jewish community can better support those affected by mental illness. Soon after, she helped create Beit R'Fuah, our house of healing, a support group that continues to this day. I want to honor Jane for having the strength to reveal her vulnerability that night, and for continuing to support the vulnerable in all the years since, opening our eyes in dramatic fashion to a devastating challenge that we had too long ignored.
I think it is extremely significant that Beit R'Fuah was created by Beth Am members and is held here at Beth Am, because I think it sends a powerful message both to the participants in Beit R'Fuah and also to the whole community. It says that you can bring your whole self to this place, to this synagogue, and that you bring all of your struggles and joys, and that this place is here to support you.
Synagogues and Jewish community, they are needed in such a deep way around these issues of mental health and mental well-being. I also think that there are things about the rhythm of the Jewish year, Jewish holidays, Shabbat in particular, the radical notion of taking a day to rest and to reflect and to be with friends and family. How beautiful is that? We probably need that more than ever right now.
Having a Beit R'Fuah in a synagogue is, it makes, where else would it be? Where else would it be? Where else in our society is there a place that says l'chaim and holiness is at the core of who we are and what we're about and what life's about? This is Jewish tradition, and the synagogue is that kind of a place.
It has brought out my Judaism, Beit R'Fuah, because connections to Jewish things, especially with mental health, which has been my main focus throughout my life, have been extremely important to me. So has it helped? Certainly.
So the whole community gains by having a Jewish support group within their own community. And that's why we love the fact that Beth Am has started this.
I think clergy can play a very important role in making congregations mental health friendly. First, we have to talk about mental illness and mental health. Every time a member of our clergy gives a talk or a sermon about this topic, people come forward and talk to us. So I've learned that mental illness, depression is very common in this community, and our talking about it normalizes it. I think clergy all over the country need to be better educated about mental illness and mental health so that they can provide informed support.
As clergy, what can we do for ourselves and our future generations of clergy? We can train ourselves to be able to be with people and accompany them, accompaniment. And then from that place of simply being with and accompanying people, learn how to make referrals or continue to be with. There is a future in that moment, and how to create that future with someone in that joining together.
Cantor David Unterman was my husband, One of the projects that he became involved with was the formation and early days of Beit R'Fuah. It was particularly meaningful to him, having battled depression for much of his life. And he was thrilled to have something going on at Beth Am that he could just plug into, help destigmatize, he hoped, mental illness by being open and talking about his own struggles. It was something that gave him real pleasure to be able to be helpful in that way.
You know, clergy have the power of the pulpit, and I think it is extremely meaningful to people when clergy talk about issues around mental illness in sermons from the Bema. It sort of casts a light and it makes it okay to talk about it. It also hopefully makes people feel comfortable coming to the rabbi to talk about their own personal struggles, but it just brings a level of openness to the community to say this is okay to talk about, and this is really important to talk about.
I actually found the group at a time when I needed it the most. The night before I came to the very first meeting, my husband was having what I didn't realize was a psychotic break. He was taking medication that was making him worse. And when I came to the first group meeting, I explained my story for the very first time ever. And the wonderful people in the group, they recommended that he go check himself into the hospital to get his medication straightened out, and it would be a safer place for him to be. So the very first night I was here absolutely just changed our lives. He checked into the hospital the very next day based on the advice of the people that I met at that very first meeting.
Growing up, people were very uncomfortable around my mom who had mental illness. It's as if she didn't have the playbook that we all intuitively seem to know about in having social skills with other people and knowing how to connect with other people. And so what wound up happening over time is that they just avoided her. It was really devastating. People are uncomfortable, so they just avoid people. They don't realize the sense of rejection that might create, or the sense of aloneness and isolation that a family might feel. Ironically, a family that probably needs more support and more love and more care from the community is actually winding up on the outskirts, feeling very alone.
As my life progressed and I became very emotionally disturbed, things got more and more complicated. At age 19, I had had a suicide attempt. I think you really need to get help, get somebody that you trust and that can help you through all the difficult things that you need to sort through in your life. I like who I am now, and I can't always say that that was how I felt about myself.
If you had a loved one, who broke their leg, you wouldn't expect them to walk because they broke their leg. And you would know, here's the rehabilitation, here's how long the cast, you'd have the plan and how to get back on track. And I think the hardest thing about mental illness is that it's very murky. What's possible is unclear. How much agency the person has in their own illness, is unclear. And sometimes the therapy works, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes this medication works, and sometimes it doesn't. And so managing our own expectations becomes difficult because it's not a clear path.
Being with is being with yourself, being who you are and what you are, and being with others. Being and listening and hearing what they have to say so that when they know that you're really listening, they really open up their heart. And there's a tremendous amount of healing that occurs from that. I've experienced it. We've all experienced it here. It's quite profound.
Statistically, 1 out of every 4 to 5 people has a mental illness or someone within their family has one. They still are very hesitant to come forward.
So that's 20 to 25% of the population. So if you look at a synagogue that has, let's say, 2,000 people, you have 400 people. That's a lot of people. And you have to address it. And when you address it in terms of the entire Jewish community, then you really have strength because you're really helping people that would otherwise not come to services, not be part of the Jewish community, feel alienated, and not grow.
I think many communities like to think they don't have certain issues, that it's someone else's community, right? If you're in a wealthy community, it's for people who are disadvantaged. If you're in a working class community, that's a wealthy person's problem. If you're in a Jewish community, that doesn't happen in the Jewish community. Wherever you are, I think people kind of try to offload the problem. So I like that there's this effort to reach out in the Jewish community to take away the embarrassment people have about talking about mental illness and say it happens in our community and our community supports people who are struggling with this.
Mental illness impacts an entire family system. It's not just about the person who has the mental illness. It impacts everybody. And I think it's really important that support also impact the whole family system because everybody needs that support and everybody needs that love and acceptance and healing and safe space to tell the truth about what's going on.
I've seen parents whose children live on the street. I've seen parents and siblings who love someone about whom they worry every day. They worry if the person has shelter. They worry if the person is going to take his or her own life. I've seen parents whose children are hospitalized for eating disorders and who cry because their child is wasting away. I've seen people whose family member is tormented by anxiety and depression. There is a lot of anguish in our community, and we need to find a way to stop hiding our heads in the sand and address it.
I remember before I came to Beit R'Fuah for the first time, my mom said, "Be careful about what you share." And I came and I was not sure what I was going to share. And I was nervous. And I was not the first person to share, thankfully, that evening. And so many people shared stories that made me realize I can tell my whole story here. I don't have to worry. No one's judging me. This person over here is going through the same thing. Or, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I'm going through. I felt like I was in the right place. And for the first time, connecting with people who I could actually say, this is my life. This is what's happening in my life right now.
No matter how wonderful a therapist I am in helping somebody look at their mental health issues and get tools and techniques to work with their mental health issues, I am a poor substitute for an entire community that can be there to support somebody. And that is profoundly healing at such a deep level. I don't think any therapist can provide that for somebody. I think that's just a an entirely different level of healing that every human being needs who's struggling with an issue like that.
I think when you're carrying around anxiety over someone you care about, struggling with a mental health challenge, I mean, sometimes you don't even realize how much it's affecting you or how much it's going to be healing and helpful to share it. So even though I'd talked about my experiences with my family before with other people, something about being in that group, I remember I started crying, and it was really very powerful, but it was really, I think, cathartic. It was healing. It was helpful to share. There was no judgment from anybody else.
By sharing stories, you learn from other people how they coped with their family member's mental illness. And all of a sudden you get an aha moment and say, oh my goodness, that helped them. Maybe I could try it. Maybe I could learn how to talk to my loved one. Maybe I could learn more resources out there. Maybe the financial burden doesn't have to be mine. Maybe there's a way that they can get help.
We can't do it alone. So we need each other, because we already are each other, so we need to come together. That's the idea of group. You know what it's like? You take a stick and you can just take it and go snap. You take 2 sticks, 3 sticks, 4 sticks, a bundle of sticks, and you try and break that. You can't break that. It is sturdy. It's unbreakable. That's like the group coming together.
There's a redemptive quality to being able to take your experience with a challenge and then help someone else through it. It kind of gives it a purpose, like it's not just some random bad thing that happened to you, but you can find a purpose in helping someone else deal with the same kind of thing. The person who takes their turn sort of sharing their own pain and challenge then turns around and offers comfort and advice to someone else having, a similar, even a different challenge.
My biggest recommendation would just be to don't be afraid to share. Just come, be an open book, and you will receive benefit.
I've seen in our Jewish community when people, for example, have a serious physical illness, everybody rallies together and makes meals and supports the family through it. Mental illness is one of the ones that still is in the shadows, that still is taboo for a lot of people.
The stigma is so great that not only does it cause the person with the mental illness not to get help because they don't want it to get out that they have this illness, but the family members that are struggling with the fact that their loved one has an illness are afraid to come and get help themselves because the stigma surrounds the whole family.
I was living in the thick of stigma. It didn't feel right to share it. I didn't want to be judged, and I didn't want people to think poorly about my husband. You just never know what thoughts people are going to have about the things that are happening to you in your life.
Because of the stigma around the issue, my experience as a child was when I tried to talk to the adults in my world about what was happening, that they brushed it off and they would say, oh, it couldn't be that bad, or I'm sure your mom didn't mean that, or I'm sure your mom was just tired or not having a good day. That just reinforced a sense that, well, I must not be perceiving reality correctly. This must be normal, and there must be something broken about me that I am having a hard time coping with this. And I think that winds up lasting somewhere deep inside for a long, long time.
Stigma is a problem because It's one of the leading causes of not receiving care, because you're in denial. You don't need the care. There's nothing wrong with you. Everybody else is the problem. And the family starts to break apart a little bit because they don't understand what is happening.
I've experienced stigma a lot, and I've had jobs where I've been hired because I have a mental health history, but I've also had jobs where I've been fired because I have a mental health history. It always was, how do I share what would be helpful for other people to know without giving true information that might not be helpful, that might cause them to think poorly about me because of their own ideas about mental health rather than their ideas about who I am.
When somebody has a mental illness, everyone is afraid. The stigma is so great, they stand back. Nobody comes to visit. Nobody knows how to help them. So everything is silent.
The person is not the diagnosis. I mean, you wouldn't say someone who had heart disease that they are heart disease. And people, it's hard for people to differentiate it because of the behavior. They see the behavior as the person, but the behavior is the illness. And when treated, when given correct diagnosis, correct medications, the behavior changes, and then they are the person who they are with the illness.
I've learned that it's incorrect to say of a person, she's schizophrenic, or for that matter, he's autistic. That is identifying the person with the disease, rather than simply noting that it is one aspect of their life. So one would say, she has schizophrenia. It would be as ridiculous as saying she is cancer. This is a person we're talking about, not a disease.
I'm really hoping that we can join with other synagogues to be able to really work in a powerful and thoughtful and coordinated way to be able to be part of the healing process around these issues. You don't have to pretend to be who you're not at synagogue. That synagogue can be a safe place to be authentic and bring all of yourself.
I think Beit R'Fuah offers a promising model for many Jewish communities and congregations. There are so many people in pain. There are so many people who are in hiding and consumed with a sense of embarrassment and shame, afraid to be honest about the realities of their lives in their synagogue. I think it could be a wonderful model for others to emulate.
It really is an act of chesed, of love. I like to think of chesed as love in action, that it is an act of love for this community, and that I'm very grateful.
Go in with an open mind. Through giving something new a try, you might find that missing link to healing that you're looking for.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechayim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechayim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'Chayim Ushmo Tzeteinu